Hello? I hope we're working this time. It appears as though we are. Let's see. Okay. Up there. Let's refresh here. Okay. Hello and welcome to the Creative Control Room podcast pre-show. This is the show where we make sure all systems are go. This is the part of the show where we make sure all systems are go. Now, I'm coming back on again because my previous stream was a failure because I didn't have my audio turned on in OBS. I'll explain why that is in a little bit. So we're doing round two. Thank you to the commenter who alerted me that my audio was not on. But it appears as though we are up and running now. So that is good. Sipping on a little bit of sparkling black tea today. Rodecaster is recording. OBS is recording. No dropped frames. Good to go there. I've got my, there goes Twitch. I've got all the resources open that I need for today. So I think we're good to go. Let's try this again. Round two. All right. Hello and welcome to episode number 87 of the Creative Control Room podcast, a show for creators, makers, and doers, where my goal is to help you make to the max. I am your operator, Ryan Hafey, and in this episode, I'm going to tell you about a color grading trick in Premiere Pro that I haven't heard anybody talk about. Let's roll that official, unofficial intro. All right. Welcome to the show. So, for those of you just tuning in, this is round two, take two of episode number 87 of the Creative Control Room podcast. And it's because I had no audio going previously. And the reason is because I use OBS occasionally for other things outside of this podcast, including recording and clipping highlights when we do fight nights. I work in boxing by day, as many of you know. And when I do that, I mute my mic audio. And in this instance, I forgot to unmute it. So I went, maybe 10 minutes of my last, of the first attempt of this with no audio. So I think we're back up and running now. Sucks to have to do that again, but hey, it's happened before. It's not the first time I messed up on this podcast, and that's it's occasionally going to happen when you go live. So anyway, yes, we have a lot to talk about today. I do want to talk about a color grading trick that I've kind of come up with. I'm sure someone out there does it other than me. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but it's a color grading technique that I use actually with my photography that for whatever reason I've just never really thought to implement into video. But I gave it a shot the other day to see if it would work, and it works pretty well. And I like the results of it. So I'm gonna show you. It's actually something that would go in addition to your normal color grading, just to kind of give you a little bit extra oomph and a little bit, some really nice contrast, I think is really what it does for your grades. So we're going to talk about that later, but I do have a couple things that I want to talk about before we get to that. The first being this keyboard here. By the way, the one benefit of doing this a second time is that I had a chance to adjust this camera because I didn't adjust it or forgot to adjust it before the first attempt at this episode. But anyway, this is the Royal Kludge RK100 keyboard. Little context to this. If you watched my last episode, I had my son on. His name is Bryce. He's 10 years old. And for whatever reason, he's become really big into keyboards. Actually, his main things right now are keyboards and butterfly knives. But he only has like practice butterfly knives. He's not like swinging around any actual blades. So don't get upset there. But he's really into keyboards and butterfly knives. An interesting combination of things, but interesting nonetheless. So he came on the podcast last week to basically tell us everything that he knows about keyboards. Now, prior to that conversation, I really wasn't that interested in getting a new keyboard, but I have for a while wanted something that took a little bit less space on my desk. My previous keyboard was probably closer to this long. I don't have it with me currently, but it was a lot longer. And as you can kind of see on my desk here, I don't have a ton of free space on the desk. I have a lot of stuff here. So with this being like this, my old keyboard couldn't fit underneath this little stand thing. So this will fit under there. This, I can turn it this way. It can go in any direction and not take up nearly as much. And it also has a full number pad. So this is the RK100 model. It's a 100 key keyboard. I guess they call it a 96%. I'm not sure what the 96% refers to. Maybe just 96% of normal keys on a keyboard. I don't know. I'm still not down with all the terminology, but this particular model, it's not RGB, but it does come with this cool blue backlight. I actually thought it had RGB. You can kind of see that a little bit better if I bring it closer. And there are some color modes where it can do some little lighting effects and things like that. I would have preferred something with a red backlight, but at least the blue kind of matches the teal in my logo. So it's got that. It can connect to your computer via Bluetooth. It can connect via Wi-Fi. It comes with a little USB Wi-Fi dongle. I tried that. I didn't like it. It would lag at times, and I'm a big fan of, not that I'm a fan of wires, but I'm a fan of wiring, my keyboard and my mouse just to avoid any lag or anything like that. So, so far so good. And really the big benefit of it is that it sounds really nice. Check this out. Let me open a notepad here. Give you a little hint of what this sounds like. So there you go. A little bit loud, actually, and that's one of the things my son was doing when he was customizing his keyboards, is putting foam into keyboards to kind of make them a little bit less loud. I think the clickiness is really satisfying, but it is on the loud side. So maybe I'll have him do that for me one of these days and kind of make it a little bit less loud. But I really like this keyboard. There's a link for it in the description below. It is an Amazon link. Interestingly, this keyboard is not for sale on the Royal Kludge website. But it is on Amazon. I don't know if they discontinued it. I did notice that on the Royal Kludge website. And by the way, this is the box. On the Royal Kludge website, they have a lot of their 65% keyboards that don't have the number pad, a little bit more compact. So I don't know if they discontinued it or what, but so far I like the purchase. I think it was about $90. But check it out. And they have a couple different color versions of it, I believe. So that's that. Next up, let's move on to, I want to talk about another TikTok tip of the day, or of the week, I guess in this case. So I haven't used this yet, but I did want to bring it up because it looked really interesting, and it's something that I plan to do when I've got a little bit more time. So I'll introduce it today, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it when I've had a chance to play around with it. But it is called soundgym.co. Don't go to soundgym.com. I tried that, and it looks like it's a phishing site. So don't do that. Not phishing, like whatever, you know what I mean. So basically what this is, soundgym.co, is as they say, it's training, it's the gym for your ears. So if you are interested in audio production, if you're interested in just kind of tuning your ear, I think audio engineering is, when it comes to, photography, video, and audio is probably where I need the most improvement. So what this attempts to do is, based on what I've seen, is kind of train your ear to know what to listen for. So when you're processing your audio, it'll help you to understand what you're hearing and what to change to make it sound a little bit better. So the description here says, get audio ear training online, improve core listening skills like frequency detection or compression, and start sounding like a pro. Anytime, anywhere, let's start training. So very interesting concept, not something I've seen before. I think it's does have some free training that you can do, but ultimately it is a paid service. Let's see, what's it cost? Oh, it's got to make me log in, so I'm not going to do that yet. But I wanted to show that. I'm going to play with that a little bit, and then I'm going to come back and report later as to what it's all about and if it's any good. So those are the two things I wanted to talk about before our main topic, which we will get into now. And the main topic at hand is a color grading trick that I came up with here. So you may recognize this face. So I'm just going to use a little bit of footage from a recent camp visit that I did as the kind of the base for this here. So this particular, let me come back to this screen before we get into it. So this particular color grading trick is meant to complement your current color grading, your current color grading, whatever workflow. It's meant to be added on at the end as kind of like an additional oomph to really get a nice contrasty look. It really adds a lot of contrast in a way that I have trouble adding. I think contrast is kind of tricky at times. Robert just joined. What's up, Robert? Contrast can be tricky at times in that, you can't just drag up the contrast slider and assume that you're going to get this really nice looking contrast. It takes a little bit of finessing, and I've kind of found a way that allows me to achieve that. And it just looks better. It's kind of hard to explain, but we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about it. So what I'll do, this isn't meant to be a color grading tutorial per se, but I'm going to go ahead and color grade this clip here to the best of my abilities very quickly. We're not going to do a full necessarily color grade, but I'm going to kind of go through and quickly grade this clip. And then once that's done, I will show you the trick. So let's get into this here. So this is just a clip from recent training camp for Mr. Senator Manny Pacquiao. So I'm going to start here. I do want to open up my Lumetri scopes, and that does not look like the Lumetri scopes that I need. What's going on there? That's weird. There we go. Okay, sometimes it does that. That's strange. So I'm going to start here, and the first thing that I like to do typically is get my white balance right. So I will usually, in most cases, grab the white balance selector up here, and I'll find a place in the clip that's supposed to be white. So this shirt looks good. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And it doesn't look a whole lot different, but you can see up here that the values, the temperature and tint values have changed a little bit, indicating that the white balance is set a little bit better. You can also double confirm that over here. So if you look at these Lumetri scopes, and by the way, if you don't see the Lumetri scopes, you can go up to Window, Lumetri scopes, and I have the vector scope YUV, histogram, and waveform RGB selected. So this is the vector scope, by the way. So if I were to change this white balance and go all high, crank it up to the warm side, you will see that the red color channel separates a lot from the others. White things in an image should be white. All three color channels, red, green, and blue, should line up. So in a lot of cases, you can, really nail your white balance by simply making sure that those three color channels over things that are white in your scene line up. So a quick way to do that, if you go into your effect controls, and if you were to mask out just a small portion of the white here, and then go back into your scopes, you can kind of see, it might even be, I could probably cool this down a tiny bit more, maybe not, okay, a tiny bit more, something like that, but you can see that it basically lines up here, so that means that this white shirt is actually white there. So I'm going to delete that. From here, I'm going to go back to my Lumetri scopes, and I'm going to go into curves. And what I want to do here, because I'm shooting, in this case, I shoot with an S-Log2 with the Rec 709 color mode. I find that retains some of that saturation and also allows you to record low saturated enough to where you're still retaining a lot of that dynamic range. Sometimes S-Log with the S-Log gamut in Sony cameras can kind of it doesn't capture enough data to allow you to be really versatile with your color grades, and oftentimes the image breaks down. So this is actually a recommendation from Caleb Pike. Should check that out. But I'm going to grab the curves here. I'm going to bring this up until I see the whites getting close to like between 90 and 100% there. Do the same here with the blacks. I'm going to bring it this way until the vector scope starts to get right down to 0. I don't want it to touch 0 or go below it, because that's when you start losing detail in the dark area. So bring this back, go right about there or so. And once I've done that, I pretty much go back to basic corrections and just start making some general adjustments here. Might bring the blacks down just a little bit more there. Whites up a little bit. Probably bring the highlights down just a tad. And shadows, really just to kind of get it to where I like it, maybe about right there. And I would say, you know, if you're playing this back, generally speaking, that doesn't look too bad. One other quick pro tip that I'll give you for color grading that I like to do, I'm actually real quick here, I might add a little bit of vibrance. When it comes to, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to add some saturation. Now, one quick tip too about this, what is this? This is the waveform. And is that waveform? No, I lied. That's the vector scope. Okay, so this, I said that wrong earlier. This is the vector scope. This is the waveform. And actually, I need to bring my blacks back up a little bit, so I started losing some detail there. Okay, so with this color chart here, basically, this is kind of like TV standard saturation. So if I was to go way up here, and actually, that's not even oversaturated, so that, but it looks terrible. So in this case, we're just going to find a saturation level that looks good to the eye. I'm going to stick right about there, and maybe a little bit less. About 120, I think, is usually the max that I go on this particular particular color setting within the Sony cameras. So I think that by itself, like I'm pretty happy with how this looks. I'm going to do one other thing here, is just kind of like a bonus trick or bonus tip for you. So if you kind of like that teal and orange look, if you go down to HSL secondary, you can grab one of these pickers here, pick some of these skin tones, and you're going to select this little button here, and then you kind of have to fine tune and finesse. So this is going to be like your hue. So you want to kind of get it in that skin tone range. Down here, this is saturation. I usually expand this a little bit, and then I want to move it around until I start seeing, you know, I want to pick up a lot of the skin tones and not a whole lot of the background. So about right there maybe. And then this is luminance. So I'm going to bump that up, move that around a little bit, and maybe feather the ends here a little bit. Cool. So that's picking up a lot of the skin tones. Next thing I want to do is I want to move the denoise and blur up to, you know, about 26 for denoise, 8 for blur or so. Then I'm going to uncheck this box. I'm going to click this, which basically reverses it or inverts the selection. And then what I can do is go to this color wheel. And what this is going to do is basically mask out all my skin tones and apply this blue color that I'm going to add to everything else but the skin tones. And that's going to create that contrast between that blue and the kind of the orange of the skin tones. So if I pull this down, you'll see how this works. If I go all the way down here, you see how it throws a lot of that kind of teal color into the image, but it doesn't affect the areas. It doesn't affect the skin tones because we've isolated those. But I definitely don't want that much. I'm going to bring it back. I usually like to do this add this as a real subtle addition. So maybe I'll put it right there, turn it off and on, see how it looks. Off, on, off, on. Again, it's very subtle, but it's enough to create a little bit of extra contrast and bring the attention into the subject there. Another pro tip when it comes to color grading, go into your curves, scroll down, where you see Luma versus saturation. If you click about right here, and then again about right here, what this is going to do is it's going to desaturate the darkest and the brightest parts of your image. If you think about, you know, if there's, in real life, as you're looking at something, a shadow, typically speaking, is going to be black in color, and a very bright light is going to be white in color, all things being equal. So what this is going to do is let's say if you've added some color into the highlights in your color grade and some of that is spilling over into the brightest parts of your image, this will remove any color from those super bright parts of the image. Same thing with the dark parts. So it just looks a little bit more natural. Okay, so that concludes how I would color grade this clip just from scratch very quickly without any additional, anything else. And then from here, this is where I would apply this new color grading technique. So what I do, pay attention. This is the trick, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the Alt key and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag it onto the next track. So what we have here, oops, I got to go back to this screen. So sorry, I'll redo that so you guys can see that. So click on it, hold the Alt key, click and drag, and then now you've duplicated that clip. So this is what you want. You want to have two of the same clip on top of each other. Next thing you want to do is go up to Effects, and look for the black and white effect. And if you're typing in to search for it, make sure you type black ampersand white. Otherwise, it won't show up. I'm going to apply this to the top layer here. That's going to make everything black and white, clearly. Then what I'm going to do, and here's the trick, I'm going to go up to my effect controls, and I'm going to go down to blend mode, and I'm going to change the blend mode to overlay. Now, when I do that, you're going to see it changes, it adds a lot of contrast. Now, this is obviously extreme. I don't want this much contrast, but what we can do now is we can take our opacity slider up here and bring this down and get it where we want. So let's say normally I usually go around maybe 30% or so. And you're saying, okay, well, that looks pretty good. Let's turn this off and on. We'll turn this layer off and on just so you can see what it's done to the overall picture. So this is with the effect on, and this is off. On, off. Now, what I've learned, or what I've noticed at least, so we'll turn this track off. So this is the original color grade. If I were to go in here and, you know what I'm actually going to do? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move those two up, and I'm going to duplicate the original layer. So what I'm going to do is mute or turn the top two layers off. So now I have the original grade, and I'm going to go back into my Lumetri color here, and I'm just going to crank up this contrast. And you notice when I crank it up here, there's just the contrast that it creates. It also adds a ton of saturation, because that you're going to notice that when you increase the contrast in your image, it's also going to add saturation. You have to compensate for that a little bit. But what I've found that when you use this technique, it actually desaturates the original image just a little bit, because what the overlay blend mode does is it's kind of like a combination of screen and multiply effects, to where it's going to make the brighter parts brighter and the darker parts of the image darker. Real quick, Robert says, your video quality is great today and almost looks like it was graded with some Hayfi Lut. The blues are really popping. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that, Robert. So, okay, so this is the original clip, the original grade with the contrast slider cranked up. Okay, now I'm going to turn the other grade on with the overlay, and we'll see what the difference looks like there. Let's see. So this is with the overlay. So that's overlay, and then that's with a lot of contrast. I can try to bring that back. Even that, I think that, I don't know, there's just something about it. And if we look at the Lumetri scopes here, you can see that it starts to take the blacks, you start to lose some detail in the blacks, like on his shirt here. When you just crank up that contrast, you start to lose some highlight detail here over on this side as well. So then once we change this back, you can see it's not quite as abrasive, still losing some things over there. I might adjust that a little bit, but I just think it creates this type of contrast that just looks really pleasant to the eye, but it doesn't look unnatural. Again, I'll turn this off so you can see the original grade. Not bad. Boom. So now, of course, this is a stylistic choice. This may not be something that would work for what you want to do, or may not look, the way that you would like, but you could experiment also with some of these other blend modes. So, for example, another one that works pretty well is the soft light. And this is, you may not have even noticed the difference there, but it's just a very subtle difference. But you can play around with some of these and see if there's another blend mode maybe that you like a little bit better. Maybe you want a ton of contrast. That's a little bit too much for my liking, but you can try that if you want. And this is multiply. This is really just going to make most of it dark. But I think that's why overlay works so well, because it's going to impact the bright and darker parts of the image. So let's see. And from here too, you might find that you also have to go back into your original clip and adjust some things there. Sometimes I'll find that when I apply the overlay layer, or when I apply the overlay blend mode to the top layer, it desaturates things a little bit more than I would like. And if I look at my Lumetri scopes here, you can see that, okay, with the overlay off, that's where the saturation levels are at. And if I activate it, you can see that it brings it in a little bit. So then I might go down to the original clip, and I might bump up that saturation a little bit more just to bring those colors back a little bit. I might even make a few more adjustments. For example, bring these the blacks up in the original clip, bring the whites down just slightly, just to make sure they're not peeking anywhere. And there you go. So let's play this back a little bit. You got some nice colors, got some really nice contrast in there. Almost looks a little bit cinematic to me, a little bit more dramatic, a little bit more gritty, in my opinion. Okay, so that's with the effect on, and then we'll turn it off just to kind of see what the original looks like. And this looks fine. Nothing wrong with this. But to me, it just kind of looks like, you know, it doesn't look like anything special. It just looks like a, I don't know. It doesn't have, it doesn't give off a different emotion for me like this does. And now my computer wants to go ahead and freeze. Great. Oh wait. So we're just gonna, but you've seen enough, so we're gonna back out of that. Anywho, so that's it. That's my trick. It's super simple. Once again, just to recap, all you have to do, and I'm sure, of course, I'm using Premiere, but you could probably use this in just about any video editing software that you have. Duplicate the clip so that you have the same clip on top of itself, and then on the top clip, add a black and white effect to it to make the clip black and white, and then change the blend mode to overlay or soft light or really whatever blend mode you feel looks best to your eye. And then adjust the opacity to basically adjust the intensity of that effect. And then if you need to, go back to the original layer just to make any fine-tune adjustments to bring back some saturation or, you know, whatever it may be. And then that's it. That's the trick. I'm surprised I don't see anyone else talking about that or using it more often. But I think it's super simple. So I'm going to be using it a lot more. And that same effect, again, that came from photography. That same effect is what I use with my photos now. That same type of technique. So it's pretty versatile. It works with your photos, and I think it looks really cool. So I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, it'd be awesome if you could hit that subscribe button wherever you happen to be watching or listening. And follow me on social media at Ryan Hafey on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks so much for watching. But today we're going to go ahead and call this one done. So keep on creating and making and doing. And we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.